Hello and welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time with me, Mihir Vasavda.
And me, Amit Kamath.
And we are back for a second episode on the wrestling protests. Last week, we spoke about everything that had happened in lead up to the second round of protests by the wrestlers. We also looked back upon how the sports ministry had gotten involved and PT Usha's comment over the protest, the fact that she denounced it. She said that the wrestlers should have first come to the Indian Olympic Association rather than hitting the streets, and the whole jingbang that had been traveling to Jantar Mantar, the protest site in New Delhi. This week, we will be, of course, starting off our episode with the wrestling protests, and time permitting, we'll also be talking about a completely different issue, the Chess World Championships, that was won by China's Ding Liren. But first up, Amit, it's been 12 days and counting now that the wrestlers are sitting at Jantar Mantar. सब कुछ हो गया वहां पर, मतलब हमने 40 डिग्रीज हीट से लेकर काफी हेल स्टॉर्म देख ली है, बारिश देख ली है. वी हैव सीन एवरीथिंग, द नेचर डूइंग इट्स बिट, बट द रेसलर्स आर रिफ्यूजिंग टू लीव. इट्स टर्निंग इनटू अ बैटल ऑफ एट्रिशन. वी डोंट नो, आई मीन आई एम एब्सोल्युटली clueless की end game क्या है इसमें, but what's your takeaway since we last spoke?
Not just the weather, Mihir. A lot of people have been doing 360-degree turns, PT Usha, as we spoke a lot about PT Usha in the last episode where we spoke about how she's trying to say or trying to imply that the wrestlers protesting on the streets tarnishes the image of India abroad. Now, she herself has had to come down and actually greet the wrestlers, tell them that, they stand with them. So at least that has happened. Besides that, a lot has happened. If we started counting every day, it's like by the time our newspaper goes to print, there is already a new story that is already trumping the previous story. Like as it happened yesterday, where we had a story saying that PT Usha has already gone to meet the protesters.
Wednesday we are talking about.
Wednesday. So we had a story about the protest saying that PT Usha had gone and met the wrestlers. Just before the edition was supposed to go to bed, I have another story that Delhi police was in open confrontation with the wrestlers. The issue was apparently beds. Because it had rained in Delhi, the wrestlers were trying to get in some new beds into the protest site so that they could sleep because they didn't want to sleep on soggy mattresses. Mihir, it's been a very hectic few news days.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned PT Usha, or thoda sa, I'll just spend 1 minute talking about that. Now, PT Usha has, of course, apparently told the wrestlers, this is according to the wrestlers' version of the discussion they had on Wednesday, that she has been misquoted. Now, we've heard the recordings. She has said that it wasn't right for the wrestlers to directly go out and protest, blah, blah, blah. But what I also found interesting that when, as an athlete herself, this was brought out by a number of people. First, the tweet I saw was by a veteran journalist, Norris Preetham. And then subsequently, thoda sa, jo hume keeda rehta hai, we dug out stories, read a couple of India Today stories from 1988 Olympics in Seoul, where PT Usha herself had protested against the authorities to get a chance to compete in the relay race.
And that was right in the middle of the Olympics.
Absolutely. And I mean, talk about tarnishing the country's image. So, of course, 30 years have passed since then, more than 30 years have passed since then. And PT Usha is more of an administrator now than an athlete.
The running spike is on the other foot, you mean?
It is well and truly on the other foot. But at least it was nice of her to go and kind of at least face to face talk to the wrestlers. I'm sure it would have given wrestlers some confidence, thoda sa at least they would have felt better. And then what happened in the night that you referred, that completely kind of twists it. Now, again, we've seen many instances where through the last 2 weeks where thoda sa ek boiling point par aa jata hai, the issues between the cops who are guarding Jantar Mantar and the wrestlers who are protesting there. There are multiple issues at play over here. I mean, what happened on Wednesday night could have easily led to something big. Thankfully, it did not. But Amit, I think जो हिसाब से protest का एक momentum बन रहा है, I mean, it's just kind of deviating from the main agenda at times. You feel that and that's largely due to the whole presence of political leaders at the site. Now, wrestlers, I've seen number of videos from Bajrang, Sakshi, Vinesh appealing कि यार मतलब ये जो हमारा मुद्दा है about sexual harassment and ब्रिजभूषण शरण सिंह, उससे आप हटके political मत कीजिए, but that's happening again and again.
It was bound to happen ever since, I think we saw one of the first videos we saw when the protests restarted was when Bajrang took the mic and told people that, last time when political parties were coming, we were politely refusing them, we were sending them away. This time we are open to political parties coming here. I think he said very openly that this time we will not prohibit any political parties from coming to Jantar Mantar, from sharing their concerns, sharing the concerns of the wrestlers. So once you open the door in, then there is no way to stop the elephant from coming into the room, right? And obviously, these are some giant elephants from the Aam Aadmi Party, from Congress. It seems like every politician, even Navjot Singh Sidhu, who's a former athlete, current politician, and he's out on bail, if I'm not mistaken, who's made his way to the protest to show solidarity. Navjot Singh Sidhu, obviously being his eloquent self, he's shot some very nice videos with the athletes where he can be seen giving them some sort of inspiration with his words, which is all he has basically. But the other thing is that now I don't think the wrestlers can also kind of shirk, of the criticism that this is now a political protest. As much as they've tried to make sure that this is not political, it will eventually be co-opted by political parties.
I like how you were carefully choosing your words there.
Like Navjot Singh Sidhu, words are all I have, right?
Words are all of us have, I guess. Maybe not the same eloquence as Sidhu. But yeah, you are right. Wrestlers are not politicians. So I'm interested to see how they balance this whole thing out, without losing the sight of the main purpose why they were protesting. So, Supreme Court has on Thursday said that their interference in this issue is now stopped. The moment an FIR was lodged, they heard the update on the status of that FIR and that's done. Now, just to kind of jog back our memories, there were 7 girls, including a minor, who have alleged Brijbhushan Sharan Singh, the president of Wrestling Federation of India, of sexual harassment. And now there is an FIR against...
There are 2 FIRs.
Yeah, there are 2 FIRs. One against Brijbhushan under the PoSh Act, and the second against Brijbhushan and his assistant secretary, Vinod Tomar, of the WFI, for the other complaints, the other 6 athletes' sexual harassment complaints. So that's that. But Amit, you and I had thoda sa ek adventure in terms of finding out what's the status of other federations, because one of the things that the Wrestling Federation was accused of by the Sports Ministry was that it did not have an internal complaints committee under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. And turns out wrestling wasn't the only federation doing that.
Absolutely. Besides wrestling, there were at least 15 federations on record who either did not have an ICC at all or had an ICC which did not meet the mandatory stipulations, right? So that way it was a very grave concern, which was part of the express investigation which both of us did today.
Yeah, and what we did stumble upon, what we did find out through the course of that investigation was something very revealing. I take the example of Handball Federation of India, which is going through its own sexual harassment situation. An athlete has complained against the federation's former secretary general. Now, Handball Federation of India is split into 2. There are factions there, and Anandeshwar Pandey used to be the general secretary of the Handball Federation of India. There is an FIR filed against him last August for sexually harassing an athlete. Now, it turns out the Handball Federation of India and Handball India, the 2 competing federations, both of them do not have an ICC. So that's a big red flag over there. And we found, apart from wrestling, there were 4 other federations that did not have an ICC. In volleyball, Amit, you spoke to them. They had a pretty bizarre way to deal with these complaints.
Yeah, they just said that they'll have a general body meeting, and when the general body meeting is held, we will take any complaints that we have and we will put it in front of the entire committee, and then they will vote on what has to be done, which is in any way a bizarre way of handling something as sensitive as a sexual harassment complaint. I mean, what if the complaint is against the president of the federation or one of the office bearers? So you will have the office bearer deciding on the fate of a complaint against himself. I mean, how does that even work out?
Yeah, and the whole secrecy bit, right? I mean, we spoke to Adil Sumariwala as well, who's the president of the Athletics Federation of India, a former athlete himself. And his federation was in the minority of the bunch that meets all the criteria. And he was explaining to us why it is necessary to have compliant PoSh committee. The biggest reason he said was the number of women participating in sport is increasing. We saw a government data which said that between 2018 and 2020, there was a 161% rise in the number of women participating in the Khelo India Games. That's the government's flagship program. Adil pointed out the importance to reach out to kids who are in the age group of under 14 because that's when they're most vulnerable, to have external members on the committee because they bring an independent view, and to create an awareness. More than anything, he kind of elaborated on the whole anonymity bit, because the individual's identity has to be protected in cases like this. And when, like Volleyball Federation, if you have an AGM, that just completely deserves the purpose.
Right. And besides that, Mihir, you look at how we found some of the federations to be in violation. Like wrestling, 4 other federations, as you mentioned, had no ICC. There were 6 federations which had no external member. You just explained why having an external member is so critical. 6 of them did not think this to be the case. There were 4 federations which had committees which had less than 4 members, that is mandated by the law. There was one federation, weightlifting, which is slightly interesting because they've decided to go ahead and have 2 committees. One is the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Committee, one is the Internal Complaints Committee. Both of these committees have 3 members which are common, and one of the committee has a 4th member. So when we asked the federation officials where or which committee would actually listen or hear the complaint, they said both of them. Now that doesn't make sense because 3 of the members are same in both of them. So how does it change?
It's I mean, in a way, expected hai thoda sa, because like we don't really expect our federations to have robust systems and functioning bodies in place. But when you see what's happening on ground, it beats me why they wouldn't have, proper committees in place. I mean, they were reminded of it on January 23rd, like we found out the sports ministry. Now, January 23rd is the same day when the oversight committee was formed to look into the allegations of sexual harassment against Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. And the same day, the government also sent a letter to all national sports federations reminding them ki while you meet a lot of criteria, there is a need to kind of change and modify certain things as well. So they had urged all the federations to re-examine their committees and make necessary changes. Well, that clearly hasn't happened. And Amit, I think it underlines especially the wrestling case, because wrestling did not have an ICC, the importance to have one. And it also exposes our federation's lax attitude towards, things like this.
In fact, Mihir, if you remember, while we were talking to all these federation office bearers, one of the office bearer very poignantly told us that we do have a ICC, but we don't expect it to be doing a lot. And we were like, why exactly is that? And he mentioned that, because in such cases, athletes prefer to go to the police rather than come to the ICC. Now, when an office bearer tells you that the athletes prefer to not come up to you, that tells you that they don't really have too much faith in the redressal mechanisms that you put in place. They don't think that the redressal mechanism that you have in place is truly independent enough to take up the case and deliver justice to you.
Absolutely. And that's the, I mean, saddest part, but also a harsh reality. And I fear the last 12 days of the wrestling protest will only further add to that whole distrust between athletes and officials. I mean, in practical thing, right? The wrestlers should not have had to be protesting on the streets. They should not have been knocking the doors of the Supreme Court or fighting with the police to just file an FIR. They should have simply approached their federations, ICC, informed them that this has happened to us, and the legal procedure would have then taken its own course. That hasn't happened, and we've seen what has transpired in the last 2 weeks in Delhi, and I don't know how it will be impacting other athletes. It certainly won't be inspiring confidence in many of them.
Absolutely, Mihir. And especially when you look at these visuals of athletes crying, athletes sobbing on the streets, especially if you look at somebody like a Sakshi or a Vinesh who won medals for India at the Olympics, the World Championships, if they are going to be treated in such a way, why would a young athlete who's maybe just in the junior India team, why would they hold any hopes for them being treated better if the perpetrator is somebody who's a very senior official, who's somebody who is politically connected with the ruling party and has means.
Yeah, totally. We'll see how this protest moves forward and what eventually happens. We just heard from the wrestlers. They have accepted Supreme Court's decision to close this case right now in the courtroom, but they have reiterated that they won't stop their protest until Brij Bhushan Sharan is arrested.
And Mihir, I think this is still evolving because now we are hearing of cases like Geeta Phogat has been tweeting about how she's trying to get to Delhi to Jantar Mantar to check up on the other wrestlers, and she's being detained outside Delhi by the cops. Even as the police say that, they are very much in favor of people protesting democratically as long as they are doing it lawfully.
Clearly that's transpiring, that's going well on ground. But yeah, I think that's the bit about wrestling that we wanted to discuss today. We won't be having any subtle, एक बहुत ही major digression होगा to a completely different topic that we wanted to discuss today, and that is chess. I mean, I understand कि बहुत कुछ इसमें smooth segue नहीं है, but well, pardon us for that. But we wanted to discuss chess, because Amit ने बहुत मेहनत की है in the last 2-3 weeks. So एक बनता था, and secondly, if we would have kept it to next Saturday, तो एक हिसाब से थोड़ा late भी हो जाता वो, because well, it's just too far back in the past by then. So basically what has happened is the World Chess Championship was held between Russia's Ian Nepomniachtchi and China's Ding Liren. Both of them were in the fray to become the new world champion, because the defending champion Magnus Carlsen hadn't participated. And this is as far as my chess knowledge goes. So I'm just throwing the floor to Amit and he'll take us through what happened, because it was an exciting match.
Right. So for listeners who maybe don't know how the World Chess Championship works, or how the world...
You can just tell me. I'm a listener who doesn't know how it works.
Right. So the format was very simple. Both Ding and Ian Nepomniachtchi were supposed to play 14 games over the course of 20 odd days to figure out the 17th world champion, which was the successor of Magnus Carlsen. Now, the problem with that was there was so much drama. There was so much drama over the course of the 20 days. Like, imagine one day before the World Championship game 1, Ding Liren decides to pack up his clothes and walk out on his hotel because he was feeling a little bit out of place in the hotel. Now, I'd like to point out that this World Championship is happening in Kazakhstan, where a lot of people speak Russian. So Ian Nepomniachtchi would have felt right at home at the hotel, which was also hosting the event. So Ding Liren, one day before he walks out, The next day he goes on to play the game. He manages to hang on to a draw. In game 2, he loses to Ian Nepomniachtchi. He comes to a press conference and tells the world that he's feeling a little bit depressed. His mind was doing strange things during the game. Now, athletes opening up about their mental struggles is not unheard of, right? Because over the last couple of years, we've seen this from athletes. In the case of chess, a chess player in the middle of a world chess championship coming out and telling the world and his opponent who's sitting in the same room that he's going through a mental breakdown of sorts.
That is unheard of.
Is unheard of. These guys are like closed vaults. You can ask them the most elaborate. You can ask them the most superficial question about how they are feeling right now, and it's very likely that they will tell you, I will tell you after the World Championship gets over. So by that standard, to have a Ding Liren come out and talk about his mental turmoil is, well.
And at this stage, Amit, those of you who were following the World Chess Championship had pretty much kind of ruled him out, I'm guessing. And I guess one of the reasons why he was in a depressed state of mind was because he had broken up, I'm guessing.
Which was, I think, that's another one of the things that he did during one of his one-on-one interactions. I think he told this to a Spanish organization that he had kind of broken up a few months back just before the World Championship, and which also affected him. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking that if he'd broken up a few months back, why does it affect the way he was preparing? But the World Championship cycle is such that contenders spend at least a few months in the build-up to the World Championship just preparing like you were preparing for, like, a competitive exam.
Amit, there will be many listeners, I hope not, but I'm guessing there will be quite a few listeners who have had a heartbreak in their life, and they would understand why it kind of would be tough to focus on something that matters. But I don't want another digression in this episode. Hum Love Guru baad mein khelenge. So tell me, then Nepomniachtchi is the favorite because he had also challenged Carlsen the previous time.
Yeah.
He on form, even though both were close to each other, second ranked, and there wasn't much to separate, but the way the World Championship match started, Nepomniachtchi looked favorite to kind of win this quite easily. But then Ding Liren turned it around. How did that happen?
So, Mihir, one of the things that Ding did was, before the World Championship started, he hired Richard Rappaport. Now, Richard Rappaport is a guy who's also a grandmaster, who was also in the candidates tournament to pick out, the contender to take on Magnus Carlsen. That was the tournament that gave us Ding Liren and Ian Nepomniachtchi to begin with. Now, Richard Rappaport did not make it through the candidates tournament, so Ding Liren said, I like you, why don't you join my team? And which is what he did. Now, when Richard Rappaport came on board, he was hired specifically so that he could help Ding throw curveballs. Every time, as we noted, over the course of the 14 games, 6 of them yielded results. 4 of them were when Ding Liren started with white. Now, the reason for that is because some of the things that he would do on the board with his openings were so unusual that every time there was a Ding Liren game with white, we would expect that there would be something that you would not expect at all at a World Championship game. And which kind of kept it interesting. When Magnus Carlsen was part of those last 5 World Championship contests, a lot of those times there were draws. Here we saw that there were at least 6 results, which is also unheard of, because there were a lot of mistakes made by both players, and some of them, they were panned as being like absolute rookie mistakes that, even training kids would not do. But then that's what kept it interesting, right?
It's like a football match with open defenses. If two teams forget how to defend, I think it invariably makes it a good read. So Ding Liren went on to become the world champion. He won it in a tiebreaker. After the 14 games, both players were level on score. So there was a tiebreaker and Ding Liren won that. Amit, just to wrap up this conversation before we go to our producer Shashank, how big a deal is this? Because China, in a way, was the final frontier for world chess. World chess had been established in USA, USSR, Russia, UK even. I mean, some part of Western Scandinavian Europe. So India, of course. China एक तरह से रह गया था, and it seems to have kind of ticked that box. How big a deal is this in China?
So in terms of chess in China, they've always had a tradition of having Chinese women's players, which are world level players. They've had a lot of world champions coming from China in women's game. But Ding Liren is the first male chess player to have actually become the world champion. Now that in itself is a big deal, because even FIDE, for that matter, I think the reason why they went to Kazakhstan, Astana, to host the tournament was because initially when they had bids for hosting the World Championship, Argentina and Mexico had some of the strongest bids. But when they realized that, one of the contender is going to be from China, they realized that having it in Astana would make it a much more time-friendly thing for Chinese audiences, which is why they actually gifted the venue hosting rights to Astana, right? Which was, I think, an indicator that they expect a lot of numbers to come in from China.
Right. I mean, we'll see if China and men's chess at least picks up. I think that's all from both of us today. But before we say goodbye, Shashank, Bhargav, you've seen us pivot from a very serious topic to another interesting topic in world sport. I mean, A, have you still been keeping abreast with the wrestling protests? And B, did you follow any of the chess?
I mean, wrestling, it's impossible to ignore, right? I mean, it's an important protest, and the fact that there still hasn't been any, serious action, and, your investigation especially, the kind of light it sheds on, just that there is no internal कोई framework है ही नहीं. जो officials भी बोल रहे हैं, they're saying कि यार वो हमारे पास क्यों आएंगे, वो पुलिस के पास जाएंगे. It shows कि मतलब they don't either take this problem seriously or are so why would you, I'm thinking, as I was hearing you guys, I was thinking why would you even say that? You would say that either because you think you are not equipped to handle it, or you think the problem doesn't exist, or you are the worst case scenario, even you are complicit in it. I don't see why you would say that. So that is just so alarming, that the fact that this is the case. And I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I have been keeping up.
I wanted to ask you even this, both of us have been looking at it from very sporting lens, but from a detached point of view, how do you look at the whole political interferences in this protest? We've seen everyone from Priyanka Gandhi to Arvind Kejriwal, even Mamata Banerjee now, who have turned up at the protest site. I mean, for someone like you, how does it look?
I think, see, if you are from a political party, you would obviously want to get some mileage out of it, right? You would want this opportunity to attack, the ruling government. That's obvious. But I don't think that should make us see this situation in a different light. That's what I feel. Because that's just, an excuse that the administration can use, right? Saying ki, "Arey, ye to political ho gaya. Ye to ab this is all funded." Yeah, or let's use this as an excuse to not believe the athletes, which doesn't make sense, right? I mean, from an outside perspective, I think it's absolutely fine. Whichever political party or whichever politician wants to come and join the protest, I think that's absolutely fine. I think we should just take the complaints of the athletes seriously, regardless of who joins the protest.
I think that's a good note to end this podcast. I guess, that's it for today then. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back next week. Well, there's already a lot on agenda for next week. There will be athletics. Neeraj Chopra return to competition on Friday. Mirabai Chanu too compete at the Asian Championship. So we'll see if we'll be discussing that or something else. But well, you'll find out when we meet again next Saturday. Thanks again for listening.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.